Travis Thompson, how are you?
Doing great, Amber. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. Travis Thompson is a fifth generation Floridian, a conservationist, the executive director of All Florida. Travis was a key architect behind Florida's Amendment 2, and he's one of the sharpest minds in the country when it comes to protecting sportsmen's rights at the policy level. So that's a broad overview, Travis. But for those maybe outside of Florida who aren't familiar with your nonprofit, can you kind of give us the rundown?
Well, and so All Florida is our in-state nonprofit where we do all manner of conservation, uh, ag policy, environmental policy, sportsman's policy. But I also work with the International Order of Theodore Roosevelt, which is a national organization that aims at passing rights to fish and hunt in as many states as possible. So that's kind of how I met them. Was I was a guy in Florida, and they said, "Would you be interested in getting this done?" And at first, I was like, "Who are these out-of-state people?" And they were like, "No, we're going to stick with you and help you get it done." I was like, "Absolutely." So we championed through it. So in state, I work quite a bit with All Florida. Nationally, I work with IOTR, and it's just a really good partnership, fighting for the stuff that frankly, that I believe keeps the wild places wild.
How did you go from being a sportsman to a sportsman's advocate? Was there like a moment that kind of pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, it's a great question. There really was. There was a moment. So it was around 2016, 17. We were having a really bad red tide outbreak, and at the time, I was running fishing charters. And I decided to go to some meetings on that, and didn't see the angling community show up that I thought should be there. And there may have even been a little bit of arrogance on my part of like, how hard can this be? I came from a Fortune 500 company, so like, how hard can this be to solve? And you learn quickly that it is complex and there's a lot of moving parts and things there. But that's kind of how I ended up in the room, and that's how I ended up alongside groups like American Sport Fishing Association and Coastal Conservation Association Florida, groups like that, because I kept seeing them in the room over and over again, working on sportsmen's issues. But that's how I ended up there. Was one day I was like, "Hey, I keep taking from this resource," and that's kind of a principle of Roosevelt, right? We love the resource, we got to take care of it. So I just decided one day I needed to show up and go.
My parents live in Florida. They live in Ruskin, so just inland from St. Pete, for those who don't know. And there is no bigger bummer than going down to visit and it's red tide and you can't do anything.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Yeah, can't even hang out on the beach, let alone fish. So
No.
now I want to talk about one of the biggest things that you've done in Florida since you've been kind of on the conservation train, and that's Amendment 2. Can you kind of explain what that is, whose idea it was, and kind of how that went from a conversation to an actual ballot measure in the state?
Sure. So, Amendment 2 was our constitutional right to fish and hunt. And that idea, it was first broached to me by Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, a group that works on this nationally with sportsmen's caucuses. And they said, "Hey, do you have a constitutional right to fish and hunt?" I was like, "No." We were working on an issue. They wanted to shut down duck hunting in an area, and I was trying to eliminate that shutdown. And they're like, "You really need one." And then I got a phone call one day from Luke Hilgeman, the director of IOTR, and he's like, "Hey, would you like to get a right to fish and hunt done?" And yeah, I was never going to be able to fundraise the money. I was never going to be able to leverage and get everyone there. So being able to have them come in as partners on it. What we did, the first phone call we had with a lobbyist in Florida, they said, "There's no way you can get this done." And no one would take no for an answer, myself included, Luke included, the IOTR team. And we pushed really hard, built out a grassroots community that included the largest fishing influencer in the world was supporting the right to fish and hunt, Josh Jorgensen, Blacktip H. We had, just every fishing guide, Hubbard's Marina, which is the top charter rated operator in the country, Dylan Hubbard, they supported Amendment 2. So we had all these groups come together, hunters, anglers, and rally around this thing. And Florida, a lot of people may not know this, but to do a constitutional amendment, it's got to be 60% plus one. And we passed with 67.4%. Proudly, we got, obviously, we voted for the president, but we got almost a million more votes than the president did in the election in the red state of Florida.
That's incredible. And I want to get back to that. But what you said that people were saying there's no way you're going to get this done. What was the resistance against it?
There's two sides of resistance. One is the anti-hunter resistance that we'll need to talk about, like the humane societies or the even the green groups that love to say we're not anti-hunting, but then they always have an anti-hunting stance. They love to say we're not anti-hunting, but
Right.
um, and then in the sportsman's world, we had some resistance as well that was very small, very finite from like a very niche corner of the fly fishing community that believes that catch and release fishing really has no impact on fishing and that we don't need this right. I think they would honestly be fine with closures in more places. I wouldn't even consider them sportsmen ultimately. So we had that pushback, and then we had pushback from the true anti-hunting, anti-fishing groups. But candidly, once we started dispelling those myths and working really hard at making sure, I'm a conservationist. I want there to be as many fish, as many deer, as many rabbits, as many. I'm a big duck hunter. I want a bajillion ducks so I can hunt them when I want to. And once we were able to dispel those myths and ensure that everything we're doing is on the up and up, and it's a conservation thing, people flock to it, and it's a basic freedom, right? Like this is not like there's lots of amendments around should we ban dog racing or should we ban pregnant pigs was one that they did in Florida 25 years ago. This is a basic tenet of Americanism, right? The idea that we should be able to go get our own food, we should be able to go hunt and harvest and do it in a humane way. Like, what's more American than that? So, absolutely, it should be protected as a right. And Vermont did it in 1777, 1779 when they passed theirs. They were the first state to do it. So, this is not a new idea.
Yeah, that's a long time coming. And I think it's important to note that the right to hunt and fish doesn't mean a free for all, right? This means the right to hunt and fish within regulations that are in place. How did you go about kind of battling the misinformation surrounding this? I know one of the biggest arguments against this amendment was that you were going to bring back maybe inhumane practices, gill nets, things like that. How did you kind of reach out to battle that misinformation?
Yeah, and so Florida, when I was in high school, I actually worked on the gill net ban amendment. So I like held signs on the street. My dad is an environmentalist. He's an environmental engineer. So this was a near and dear thing to not damage the gill net ban in Florida, which is an amendment. And the first thing we did was we sat down with a lawyer, and we sat down with one of the highest ranking lawyers in the state at the time and asked him, will this does this put this in jeopardy at all, or do we need to change the verbiage? And they're like, absolutely not. To undo another amendment, it would have to expressly state this is undoing a previous amendment. And so, we felt very comfortable. We met with agency attorneys, Supreme Court, former Supreme Court justices to ensure that what we were doing was going to in no way damage the natural resource. Then we were able to take that forward, and spread that message through social media, through a bajillion podcasts and radio interviews, and just it was like you told the same story over and over and over again. But the crux of it was we want to make sure, to your point, this doesn't undo anything. So some people would say, well, why do we need it if it doesn't change anything tomorrow? And I say far too often in the conservation space, we react instead of being proactive about things. This is proactive. We know that anti-hunters are coming. We know that gun control people are coming. Even in the free state of Florida, you can feel those pressures. They're not given much credence today, but we feel those pressures. So what we want is to ensure that when they get here, we've got a backstop. Does this shut everything down? No, but it makes the threshold much higher that they're going to have to jump through to close down hunting or fishing. And that's something we definitely want to protect for forever.
And I think that there's probably, Florida, as you mentioned, is now the 24th state with this protection. And I think there were probably, to your point, a lot of people who were like, why is this necessary? Fishing is a monster industry in Florida. Fishing is not going anywhere. But now we see what's going on in places like Oregon. And then it's pretty clear why codifying these rights is important.
So where we see those attacks happening, and you're talking about IP 28 in Oregon, which is the Peace Act, is what some people call it.
Yes.
4 years ago, a similar ballot initiative was moved forward, and everyone said, "Oh, it'll never make the ballot. Why are we worried about it?" This year, it's almost certain to make the ballot, and everyone's saying, "Well, it won't pass. Why are we worried about it?" We're worried about it because these people continue to come. You know, I I don't know how else to say it, but other than you have to protect the things you care about. I lock my door every night because this is where the people that I care about, the things I care about are. It's not because I'm getting robbed, it's because I don't ever want to be robbed. So this is what that is. It's a proactive step to shut that type of thing down. You mentioned the Peace Act. There's a group actively working right now to ban live bait, the sale of live bait in multiple states around the country. What is more American than I don't know if you fish or not, Amber, like as a regular angler, but like what's more American? Everyone starts fishing with a thing of earthworms, a little styrofoam container of earthworms or crickets or minnows. Like that is the most basic thing. This is not protecting like the rich guy idea of hunting. This is protecting the basic entry points of hunting and fishing. A right to fish and hunt shuts that down. And so it doesn't protect from those attacks entirely, but it definitely makes it a much harder threshold of if you want to ban live bait. Well, hold on, we've got a constitutional right to fish and hunt. How are you getting around that? You want to the IP28 thing isn't just hunting and fishing, it's coming after ranching, it's coming after animal husbandry. There was even something in it about pesticides with bugs, like
Yep.
wasps or something to that effect. I
Yes.
mean, we're talking, these are animal rights extremists, and I'm dealing with animal rights activists. We just need to stop that conversation. Food
Yeah.
security is national security. We should be able to source our own food. We should be able to go get our food within the laws and within the confines because we can't just have a free for all, like you said. And every one of these rights to fish and hunt protects the state's ability to govern it using science to govern wildlife management. It's that simple.
1000%. And I want to set this up for our audience who might not be familiar. I know that Travis touched on it, but there is a ballot measure in Oregon, IP28, and it is very close to having the number of signatures needed to go on the ballot this November. So proponents are marketing it as this warm and fuzzy anti-animal cruelty act. But basically what it does, well, essentially and literally what it does is criminalizes anything that harms or kills animals. So that
Yes.
means a statewide ban on hunting, on fishing, on ranching, even as you said, pest control would be illegal. So if this law passed, it would have a catastrophic effect on not just the state's economy, but the wildlife itself. And it would criminalize 1 million Oregonians. It would be sweeping. So when you saw this come up in Oregon, and I know that they've been trying to get it on the ballot for the last couple rounds. When you saw it gaining momentum, what was your reaction? And or, like, had you seen it coming?
I've seen it coming. Yeah, like we've been talking about it for years and years and years. It's a talking point in my world. But at the same time, it's scary to look at the numbers now. And I haven't looked today, but the last time I looked, I think they're about 12,000 signatures away. And to what you just said, they're couching it as, "Hey, Amber, how do you feel about animal cruelty?" No one likes animal cruelty,
Right.
but they're defining it very broadly and they're using it to get this onto the ballot. And I think with the advent of social media, the advent of AI, we're going to get more and more clever around how we go about getting these things done, how we get things on the ballot. And I just think that is a major, major issue in the country, particularly someone that loves conservation, loves wild spaces. That's why a right to fish and hunt in Florida was so important to me. Is I don't want to see. We've had a group down here fighting against bears for 10 years, and we had our first bear hunt this last year. That group has single-handedly in the free state of Florida been able to keep our commissioners from talking about it. Once they brought it up and they passed it and put on the bear hunt, IOTR got involved with a lawsuit that said, no, we've got a right to fish and hunt. And now that we have this right to fish and hunt, and you've said we should have a bear hunt, you can't undo it because of emotions or feelings. There needs to be science that drives the policy here, and we want to ensure that that's so. This is a really critical tool. It's an important tool. We told voters this is the most important vote you'll have as a hunter or angler. It's the how often do we get to vote on something? As a conservationist, how often do you get to vote on something that specific? And we're like, this is one of the most important things you'll get to vote on in your lifetime because you're protecting it not just for today, you're protecting it for generations to come. I've heard Clay talk before about lab grown meat and how he could imagine 100 years from now society viewing meat very differently because maybe it's inhumane. I want to make sure that we aren't growing meat in a lab, that we're able to get meat from, not just cattle, but also wild places, wild animals. And I want to protect that so that my kids, my grandkids, generations I won't know will have the opportunity, if they choose, they'll have the opportunity to go hunt and fish.
Yeah, and this thing in Oregon, and if it were to happen anywhere else, is not just going to affect outdoors people. It's not just going to affect hunters and anglers and ranchers. It will affect them greatly, but it's not just them. It's the average everyday person who eats meat. It's also the economy of the state itself. Just protecting these natural resources and these animals. Most of that funding, right, if I'm correct, comes from licensing fees, right, for hunters and anglers and things like that. And so when you shut down that source of funding, though, the wildlife doesn't get the protection that it once had. Not to mention the fact that without any kind of population control, you're looking at diseases spreading, you're looking at more deer getting hit by cars, you're looking at, like, it's not some like kumbaya wildlife utopia that these animal rights extremists want to paint it as.
You're talking huge numbers in the Wildlife Sport Fish Restoration Fund is what we call it, WISPR.
Mm-hmm.
It's also called Pittman Robertson on the hunting side or Dingle Johnson on the fishing side. Huge dollars go back to states allotted on the number of hunting licenses and fishing licenses sold. What would that do to Oregon's, not just their economy, people that travel there to hunt and fish, but what would that do to their wild lands, to their management of wildlife, to like not just from a population control standpoint, but also like um, are they now? I don't know the species there, but are they going to have to hire sharpshooters and spend taxpayer money to curtail wildlife populations that grow? So is there not just hunters and anglers pay and then money's reimbursed to the states through the Fed? So as a hunter, I'm worth $35 to the state beyond just whatever I paid in license. So it's a significant number. That's used to acquire lands. That's used for boat ramp maintenance. That's used for youth programs. That's used for all sorts of things that everyone benefits from. The places where I hunt aren't just limited to me hunting. There's people that bike ride on it. There's people that horseback ride on it. There's people that walk their dogs or hike or bird watch. All that exists under the umbrella that kind of we provide as hunters and anglers to ensure that we have wild places where we can chase this game and clean waters where we can chase these fish.
And something I think that is also being overlooked is IP 28 allows for, I believe, two exceptions: self-defense and veterinary care. So, like, euthanasia will still be legal, but it does not make an exception for things like invasive species. So if you had a ban, which invasive species I think are something quite a bit about, living in Florida, if you had a statewide ban on harming animals in any way, that means an invasive species could come in, wreak havoc on the ecosystem, and there's absolutely nothing you could do about it.
I know a number of people that are Python contractors in the state of Florida. They literally go out and if you're a contractor with one of the agencies, you can transport them live. These people love snakes unlike anyone I've ever met before. You and I, Amber, if we went out and caught one, we would have to kill it because we don't have a permit to move it alive. We would have to kill it on site and then we could transport it. These people are permitted to transport them, and it bothers them to kill the snakes because they like pythons. Pythons are kind of cool snake. If you've ever been around a pet one, like they're tame and they have a little bit of personality. It bothers them to kill it. But at the end of the day, you have to take care of the natural resource that we have here, the ecosystem that we have here. And so to your point, if something like that were to take hold in a state that passed something like IP 28, now without a right to fish and hunt, without this protection that exists, you could see your game commission say, yeah, you're not allowed to harm any animal under any circumstance. And it's such a harebrained idea, and it's such a it's antithetical to like the American idea, right? Of how we should exist, our way of life, and how we operate on this space in this space.
Yeah, in the fall, I spoke to Taylor Stanberry, who is the first female winner of the Florida Python Challenge. I think she caught 30 pythons over the
She
course of the
did.
competition. Yeah, in July.
She's about this big.
Yes, she is. She's remarkable, and she does a lot of conservation work herself with different animals. But she is so passionate about snakes. She rescues other types of snakes and relocates them and things like that. And so I think that's another misconception that people have about hunters and anglers and trappers, is that, like, I would argue that sportsmen and sportswomen love these animals more than your average animal rights activist does.
Oh, we do. So I run a hunting operation, a waterfowl hunting operation in Florida, and I it's some days I don't even hunt because I enjoy watching ducks so much, but I get great pleasure out of seeing people shoot their first duck or seeing the ducks work or whatever. But I will get out of bed just to watch ducks. Like they make me get up in the morning, and I enjoyed it. It's turkey season in Florida at the time we're recording this, and I can't tell you. My dad is probably sitting in the woods right now listening for a turkey, and he gets out of bed because he loves it so much. He loves turkeys. I don't know that he killed a turkey last year, but he went and turkey hunted so many times. But he just loves being in the woods and watching the world wake up and experiencing that.
Yeah, I mean, just a respect for these animals and what they provide for your family. I think that's really important. Tell me now. We've talked a lot about Oregon and Florida, but I know that there are issues across the country similar to like this. Tell me about what you're working on in Ohio and Colorado right now. I believe. What are those
Well,
efforts?
yeah. At large, IOTR, the International Order of Theodore Roosevelt, we're being touched in almost 12 states right now where either a legislator has run a right to fish and hunt because there's a couple of ways to get it to a ballot. Some states you have to get signatures, other states you can run legislation. But we've had a number of states reach out where a legislator's like, hey, we want this protection. We don't want to be like Oregon. We want to model what was done in Florida. And this is super nonpartisan. We've worked in red states and blue states, because you'd be shocked. I think sometimes we tend to think, oh, all the hunters are old dumb rednecks, and that's the only people that care about it. But candidly, you go across the country and you see very different pockets and very different demographics, and you can go into a blue state like Maine, and there's just as many hunters there as there are in any other state. So it's fun to work on. We are really working hard in Ohio right now. We'd love to see the Ohio legislature move SJR 8 forward and put it on the ballot this fall so that folks could decide whether the state of Ohio has the right to fish and hunt. And that's ultimately what this is about, is you're letting the voters decide whether they care about it, which we believe overwhelmingly they do. As we saw in Florida, this was not a partisan thing. In fact, the Democrat Party, we had Democrat sponsors in the House pass the legislation, and then the Democrat Party right before the election came out and said, we oppose this. Didn't change it one bit in polling, didn't change it one bit in turnout, because frankly, people care about hunting and fishing. And this was really powerful to see. So we're working really hard in Ohio. And then in Colorado, it's in its infancy there. Kind of talking. There's a number of other states. I know that Delaware's talking about it. New Hampshire's just had a vote and it didn't pass in the House, but hopefully it'll be back there. So our fingers are in a lot of pots trying to get this passed. Our goal is to get this passed in as many states as we can, because we want to see hunting and fishing protected for forever. And I'd like to work myself out of a job. Like if we can get all 50 done, I'll go find something else to do.
Yeah, I mean that's the perfect world, right? And I with all of these things going on the ballot in different states, that's why I think this having this conversation is so important. I think education is so important, and as you touched on, in our current political climate, it is kind of natural for people to turn everything into a left versus right, us versus them sort of thing. But I think conservation above all is and should be bipartisan. I mean, we all exist on this land. We all coexist with these animals. This is something that we need to all have a seat at the same table and talk about, without the smoke and mirrors of something like the Peace Act trying to sell people something that it's not. Does that make sense?
So spot on. And I'm thinking back to when we did Amendment 2 in Florida, and the Noted 2 group, one of the founders of it was an investor in a artificial lab grown meat company. Like, to put it in perspective of where this opposition is really truly rooted in, which I think if you polled on that, most people would say they don't want lab grown meat, regardless of party or anything else. So yeah, like conservation is nonpartisan, but also this idea of being able to source your own food, where respecting where our food comes from, food security is national security. Like, I think all those things kind of roll together, and overwhelmingly people care about them.
Yeah. For a hunter or angler in a state that maybe doesn't have a constitutional protection, or maybe is in a state where something like this is happening in Oregon or Ohio or Colorado, what should they be doing right now if they want to kind of get involved and make their voice heard?
You can reach out to IOTR, or Theodore Roosevelt Action is the political action side of that. There's groups like howl.org. I've worked with them extensively. Charles at Howl, that you can reach out to those guys. Talk to your legislators. Everybody in state knows someone that's a state representative. And I'm not talking the person that goes to DC. I'm talking the person that goes to your state capital, your state senators, your state legislators. Ask them to support running something like this, and we'll get involved with it. CSF will get involved with it. We've seen, I cannot name the number of groups that we've seen roll up their sleeves. Delta Waterfowl, Ducks Unlimited, National Wild Turkey Federation. All these groups overwhelmingly support this because ultimately it's going to protect conservation. And that's, if you want wild stuff, like I said a minute ago, even if you want, we saw a big push from the environmental community in Florida too that recognized hunting as a conservation tool. They supported Amendment 2 because they recognized this was going to help keep Florida wild as we grow and develop. This is a tool that can help keep some stuff green. So it's a really important thing. There's a lot of states that do have it, but 26 don't. And we'd like to flip that script and make it to where 50 of them do. And those last couple will be difficult, but we'll get them there.
What do the next 5 years or so look like? Are you optimistic?
I'm very optimistic because I think this is a tool that more and more people are learning about. I think it's a tool that people don't even realize exists in some cases. I didn't know it existed until 2019, and I've been in conservation since 2013. So I was kind of late to the party as well. Um, and I think it's a tool that, as you learn more about it, you can get really in the nuanced weeds around the law around it and what it could and could not be used for. And I just think it is a really critically important thing that is going to, as more states catch on to it, as more hunters catch on to it, as more anglers catch on to it, it's going to become a linchpin moving us forward. And I'm really hopeful. I don't want to set numbers that get held against me, but I'd love to see us, in the next 5 years, move five more states. So go from 24 to 29 or 30. Like that puts us right on the precipice of like breaking through. Because I think as you do more, it becomes more normalized too to get it done everywhere. And so I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we see a lot more movement on it moving forward.
Well, I'm quoting you on that, Travis, and I'm going to check back with you in 5 years and see where we're at.
Perfect. I'll put that on my calendar right now.
Excellent. And thank you so much. I feel like this was a really great conversation, and it's one that needs to be had. If someone wants to follow you or get involved with All Florida or just see what you're up to, where can they go?
Yeah, you can find me at Travis Thompson. I'm also on at IOTR_official quite a bit. And then all FLA ORG is our All Florida account. So you can find us any of those three places. Reach out. We'd love to hear from folks. We'd love to have conversations. We don't shy away from hard conversations. And I think that's how we get better, right? And so let's work together and save hunting and fishing for forever. IOTR slogan, I'll leave you with this, is stand in the arena, which comes from Theodore Roosevelt, the idea of being the man in the arena. So whether you win or lose, it's the fact that you showed up and dared greatly and stood in the arena, and that's really powerful.
Well, I can't think of any better way to end that. Thank you so much, Travis. And we got some work to do before November.
You got that right. Thanks for having me, Amber.
Of course.